The doorman pocketed my keys without a glance. The fountain outside the Langham Hotel in Chicago gleamed gold while jazz wafted from beyond the glass doors. I smoothed my jacket, consulted my watch. 7:12 p.m. on schedule, I strolled to the registration desk. A young lady in a black blazer looked up and grinned. "Good evening, name." "Harrison Mercer." She traced her finger along the list, then back, then down again. Her smile remained constant, but her gaze flickered. "I'm afraid I can't find a Harrison Mercer on our guest list," she said. "Please check under +1 for Vivian Mercer. She's the senior partner and she's being recognized tonight." The woman tapped something onto her tablet, peeked at the gentleman beside her. Older, silver cufflinks, a demeanor that whispered, "I handle situations." He leaned over, scrutinized the screen, then stood upright again. "I regret to inform you, Mr. Mercer, but there seems to be no Harrison Mercer on our list." No one with that name is listed as a +1. After standing still for 3 seconds, I smiled and responded, "I fully comprehend." "Good evening," I added before turning around, exiting through the golden doors, giving my ticket to the valet and driving home. However, they weren't aware of what followed. As the awards ceremony began, during the speech, Vivian's phone started ringing persistently, not me on the line. "This is Harrison Mercer," the caller introduced himself. "I am 46 years old. For 11 years, I led the Midwest operations for a commercial real estate development firm based in Naperville, Illinois. I managed a team of 32 people, handled deals from Green Bay to St. Louis, and built a reputation that allowed me to enter any room in this city and network with influential individuals. I excelled at my job, but apparently I was also terrible at reading my own wife. At a costly fundraiser in Lincoln Park, Vivian and I crossed paths, an encounter marked by exchanged business cards during handshakes while expensive wine flowed. Vivian, aged 31, possessed an intimidating brilliance that caused others to feel uneasy, a litigation attorney with ambitions as sharp as razors. I admired this trait of hers, ultimately leading me to marry her. Our marriage endured for 9 years, not flawlessly, but with genuine honesty. We owned a house in Hensdale, Illinois, complete with a 3-car garage and spacious yard, the kind of area where friendly neighbors wave from their driveways. We dined with colleagues, shared calendars, savings accounts, and goals. However, I would only come to fully grasp, 2 years into our marriage, that for the final period of our union, an unseen third entity had become a part of our shared plan. 51-year-old Donovan Ashby, CEO of Ashby Capital Partners, had twice been featured in Crane's Chicago Business per annum, making sure his achievements were well known. His firm collaborated on 2 significant commercial litigation cases with Hartley and Cole, where he first encountered Vivian. Unbeknownst to me at that time, this was the beginning of our story. I didn't learn any of this on the night I drove to the Langham and heard those fateful words. "Your name wasn't listed." All I knew was that for months something had felt amiss, and tonight it solidified into a reality I could no longer ignore. However, before detailing what transpired next, the events unfolding within that ballroom while I returned to Hensdale, I must take you back. For my journey to standing outside a hotel check-in desk, a stranger in my own marriage, didn't begin that night. It commenced approximately 14 months prior. If you're a new reader, click the subscribe button immediately and leave a comment below. How would you have reacted in your situation? If this tale resonates with you, don't forget to like it. It helps keep such stories going. Let me transport you back to the start. Vivian achieved partner status at Hartley & Cole when she was 38. It was a Tuesday in October. She called me from a conference room, and I could hear champagne being poured in the background. I drove downtown, took her to Alinea, and spent the evening across from her, watching her radiate, a glow I hadn't seen for years. That was the last night I can recall feeling like we were completely united, not due to any dramatic event. There was no conflict that night, no harsh words spoken. It was more like, after she became partner, I ceased being her anchor, and I didn't realize it was happening until I had already drifted away. The first tangible sign appeared approximately 4 months later, in February. She held a partner's retreat at a resort in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, 60 miles north of Chicago, right on the water, typical firm business. She had visited it previously 2 years back. Recently, she returned on a Sunday afternoon, and there seemed to be a change in her. Not sorrowful, not remorseful. A distinct alteration that one observes when an individual makes a silent resolution within themselves without consulting others. I inquired about her well-being, to which she replied, "Fine. Good discussions, good food." The lake was frozen and appeared beautiful. Afterward, she retired upstairs, took a shower, and upon returning, poured herself a glass of wine, seated at the kitchen island, intently gazing at her phone, a posture typically seen when she prepared for a deposition. I allowed it to pass. 3 weeks later, she began staying longer at work. Though this was not uncommon for a partner, I was aware of it. However, the nature of her evenings transformed. Earlier, she would call me upon leaving, regardless of the hour. This practice faded so gradually, I barely noticed it subsiding. By April, she was traveling more frequently. 11:15 p.m. on a Thursday in May, while engrossed in portfolio projections at the kitchen table, my phone buzzed with a text from Vivienne, explaining she was running late. It wasn't until 12:40 a.m. that she returned, emanating the aroma of another restaurant mixed with someone else's cologne. I pondered calling her, inquiring about whom she was with, but instead decided to let the matter rest and continue working on my spreadsheet. This is who I am, a person who deals with matters silently, contemplating before acting. While this quality is often seen as a strength by those who know me, on that particular night it felt like something else entirely. She kissed me on the cheek and greeted me with a hey. In response, I simply said hey back and we both retired to our beds. By June, I had begun to perceive an emerging pattern that I didn't care to name, not because the proof was indisputable. It wasn't not at that point, but because of the gradual changes. Tiny alterations in behavior that, on their own, were insignificant but collectively suggested a picture. Her phone was now always placed face down when she was home. She switched to using AirPods for her calls, even casual ones, instead of the usual speakerphone. She adopted a new workout schedule, going to an Equinox downtown 3 times a week instead of the one nearby in Hinsdale. The downtown Equinox was 40 minutes away during morning rush hour, yet she never complained about the inconvenient commute. Additionally, she began locking her laptop, something she'd never done at home before. At work, yes, that's commonplace, but not at home. In her home study, she began closing the laptop each time she left the room, even for quick errands like fetching water. I hesitated before mentioning it, eventually deciding against it. Her work trips escalated significantly. Prior to making partner, there were approximately 8 trips in a year. However, in the subsequent 12 months, the number rose to nearly 22. Upon revisiting our shared calendar later, I observed this change more clearly. The calendar was accessible on both our phones for years. It wasn't spying. It was merely scrutinizing the collective data instead of individual trips. Also, a distinct cologne appeared frequently every 2 to 3 weeks, usually after she claimed late-night work with colleagues. This scent is not common among lawyers and stands out in comparison to public spaces like crowded restaurants. I did not spy on her. I wish to emphasize that point. I'm not the type to invade privacy or use tracking devices on my spouse. That's not my style. However, I do have an eye for patterns. It's part of my profession. One such pattern became apparent. In July, while returning from a site visit in Schaumburg, I passed a restaurant on West Randolph Street in Chicago, Montverde to be precise, an Italian eatery that demands reservations well in advance. At a red light, I looked inside the window and noticed Vivienne at a table near the window. She wasn't alone. A man dressed smartly with silver hair was seated opposite her, leaning intently towards her, a gesture people make when they want to show they are fully engaged. I didn't recognize him immediately. It took me 3 weeks to identify him. My acquaintance, Garrett Finley, who managed a private equity firm in the Loop, brought up Ashby Capital Partners during a lunch meeting, which led me to his identity. I brought them up since they recently finalized a riverfront development property deal in the West Loop, which Garrett had been keen on. Donovan Ashby, he said. Intelligent, well-connected, always present. His firm handles numerous legal matters on the litigation side, including contract disputes. I remained silent but stored the name away. Later that night, I searched for Donovan Ashby online. His professional website featured a polished image of him, sporting silver temples and dressed smartly, slightly leaning forward. He was familiar to me at once. I closed my laptop and sat in my home office for approximately 40 minutes, doing nothing but enjoying the silence. Then I headed downstairs to prepare dinner because it was Tuesday, the day I cook. Vivian arrived home at 7:30. We dined together. She shared an update on a motion she filed that afternoon. I spoke about my Schaumburg site visit. We tidied up together and she retreated upstairs to answer emails while I tuned into the news. That evening, I made a choice that's crucial for you to comprehend before we proceed. I chose not to challenge her, neither out of fear nor willingness to tolerate the status quo. Instead, I wanted clarity about the situation before taking any action. In real estate, one doesn't step into negotiations unprepared. One gathers data, understands the landscape, and lets the other party reveal their cards first, before laying down your own. This is exactly how I navigated the subsequent 3 months of my marriage. What emerged during this period wasn't merely an affair, it was a scheme. It took me some time to recognize it as such. Initially, I was only deciphering a pattern. The late nights, the Saturdays she spent at work unexpectedly, her altered focus whenever her phone vibrated and she believed I wasn't looking. That was the affair, plain and simple, but the scheme came into view later. In September, Tom Eckhart, our financial advisor, contacted me to verify that Vivian had arranged a meeting to discuss our investment distribution. This was unusual, as Vivian had never previously scheduled such a meeting without informing me first. I appreciated his heads-up and informed him I might participate in the call. He responded that this seemed logical as he expected both of us to be present. 2 days later, he called back, slightly uneasy, to disclose that Vivian had changed the meeting time to one she knew I'd be absent due to work commitments. She'd instructed him to indicate she held power of attorney for financial decisions. While this was valid as we'd both set it up years ago, she hadn't used it independently before. In response, I reached out to Preston Cole, a family law attorney based in downtown Chicago, with whom I'd collaborated on a property transaction 3 years earlier. I provided a general overview of the circumstances. He advised me to maintain records, scrutinize our financial landscape, and not delay protective actions if necessary. I acted promptly, having mapped out our joint finances by October, secured my premarital assets, and officially involved Preston. Without sharing any details with Vivian as she hadn't spoken about it either, I accepted the firm's anniversary gala invitation in mid-October. Hartley and Cole were marking 25 years, a black-tie affair at Chicago's Langham Hotel on November 14th. Vivian was to receive special recognition for her work in commercial litigation, her first significant award as a named partner, which she mentioned during dinner upon receiving the invitation. She confirmed the firm gala is on the 14th, a black-tie event she's already planned with her partners. She didn't include "we" in her statement. It was I agreed to attend. Upon my response, she clarified it as a work affair, implying my absence would be acceptable. She hinted at a lengthy discussion on work matters and potential boredom for me. I countered with assertions of interest and promised to wait for details. She never disclosed them. I refrained from pressure, only noting her omission of my name on the guest list and watching for further action. What followed was inaction from her side. The 14th arrived. I donned black tie, drove to the Langham, handed over my keys to the valet, and heard those words, "Your name isn't here." I wish to share with you the true emotions I felt at that moment. Not the surface-level version I might have conveyed that night, which was calmness because I showed nothing externally, but the actual emotion, more complex in nature. A crystalline chill pervaded the air, stemming from the moment a long-awaited truth emerged from the shadows. The murkiness dissipated, leaving only the stark reality unveiled. My wife deliberately excluded me from her guest list to spend the night with Donovan Ashby, a fact I had to accept. I hopped in my car and drove back to Hinsdale. I fixed a drink of bourbon, settled in my study, and contacted Preston. "This is Harrison," I said. "Proceed with all we've planned." "Are you certain?" "I am." After the call, I sat alone in the darkness, contemplating memories, her promotion night at Linnea, our first encounter during a fundraiser in Lincoln Park, and how enthralled I was when she passionately debated appellate procedure. Reflected on the house in Hinsdale, the joint calendar, the mutual plan we had constructed yet seemed to lose its shared aspect somewhere. I pondered it all, then chose to relinquish it. Not in a flamboyant manner, not with sorrow or anger as one might expect, but by making a decision. To conclude that chapter accurately and initiate the next one similarly. Now for what I mentioned at the outset. Here's the scene unfolding within the Langham Hotel while I was seated in my study in Hinsdale. At around 8:45 p.m., precisely during the ceremony, as Hartley and Cole's managing partner started his speech honoring Vivian, a call came in. Not to Vivian's phone, but Donovan Ashby's. The caller was Celeste Ashby, aged 48. She had been married to Donovan for 19 years. It appeared she knew nothing about Vivian, or so everyone presumed. She learned the truth 2 hours prior to this call. Picture this scenario. Donovan Ashby nestled amongst legal partners and executives at Chicago's Langham Hotel, while his phone pulsed with his wife Vivian's name repeatedly. This was during her recognition award ceremony at the front of the room, where she was grinning for the cameras. He ignored the initial calls, then the second. By the third call, the person beside him had taken notice. By the fourth, Donovan excused himself and departed the ballroom without returning. One of the partners noticed a subtle shift in Vivian's expression as Donovan exited the room. Later, it was her brother, Reed Whitmore, who revealed the news to Celeste. Reed, a commercial real estate broker, had business connections in similar circles. Though not a close acquaintance, he was aware of Donovan's existence. How did Celeste learn about it? Through her brother, Reed. Upon learning discreetly about Harrison Mercer's hiring of a family law attorney and asset restructuring through professional networks, Reed obtained information and relayed it to his sister. It wasn't me who initiated this. I want you to know that, truthfully, I didn't pass information to Celeste Ashby nor manipulated her discovery. What I did was make actions that were noticeable to those attentive enough, and Celeste Ashby's brother happened to be one of them. Truth often spreads spontaneously when one ceases to struggle so much to control it. The ensuing weeks turned out to be taxing, not due to drama, but because they were filled with legal procedures, financial procedures, and the systematic unraveling of a shared existence. Vivian contacted me the morning after the gala. I was already at work. "You attended the event last night," she said. "It wasn't a demand," I responded. "My name wasn't included." A pause. "Harrison, let's discuss." "I concur. My lawyer will coordinate with yours to arrange a meeting." Another period of quiet. "This conversation will take longer. You already have legal representation." "Yes, I do." "How long have you, Vivian?" I maintained a calm tone. "We'll communicate through our lawyers. That's the most straightforward approach." She ended the call. She phoned back 4 minutes later. I didn't pick up. I diverted it to voicemail. She called 3 more times that day, twice the following morning. Then the calls ceased, indicating she had discovered I had filed earlier or her own lawyer suggested avoiding contact. What remains vivid from that week isn't the calls, it's the silence between them. The way the house felt upon returning home each evening, just me and the spaces we shared for 9 years. Not a mournful silence, not an angry one, just an honest quietness. The sound of a circumstance acknowledging its true state. At my workplace, there was a senior colleague named Boyd Carmichael who'd experienced 2 divorces before finding stability, and he shared something with me that didn't fully resonate until that week. He said, "The toughest part isn't when they depart. It's the months preceding when they've already left, yet no one has explicitly confirmed it." He stated those months are the most costly, both emotionally and practically, as you continue to bear the expenses of something that's already concluded. His words proved accurate. By the time we initiated the legal proceedings, I had already grieved and reconciled with the situation. I was prepared to proceed. The subsequent weeks disclosed, through legal avenues and the rapidly developing social dynamics of our intersecting professional circles, that Vivian and Donovan had been involved for about 22 months. Their connection originated at Lake Geneva Retreat. In the hours following an unofficial gathering, a group including business partners and their companions dined privately at a lakeside restaurant, where Donovan Ashby was present. During this time, Vivian made several financial moves that she hadn't shared with me, consulting fees received through an undisclosed personal account, and suspensions of investments without prior notice. Although these actions were subtle, they were intentional. Vivian had been subtly and systematically planning an exit. The twist was that I too had been secretly preparing a departure. However, my actions were taken cautiously, legally, and transparently, informing my lawyer every step of the way. In contrast, Vivian's maneuvers lacked such diligence. Preston excels in his profession. In a conference room on the 42nd floor of a Loop building, we confronted Vivian's lawyer with a comprehensive understanding of our financial status, even the aspects Vivian aimed to keep hidden. The divorce lasted 7 months and was not amicable, but it was equitable in the end, and the judgment acknowledged the true state of affairs, including Vivian's unilateral asset decisions during the latter years of our marriage. She did not secure what she intended. Donovan Ashby's downfall occurred swiftly. Celeste filed for divorce a week after the gala, and she was vocal about her motives. In a social and professional milieu where rumors spread quickly, especially in Chicago's commercial real estate and corporate law circles, the news propagated rapidly. Ashby Capital Partners did not experience immediate decline, a common occurrence for such firms in the short term. Public personal failures often lead to strained relationships, which in turn can impact financial statements. Two significant legal partnerships at the firm, such as Hartley and Cole, let their contracts expire towards the year-end silently. Donovan departed from Chicago 16 months post the grand event. Rumor has it he settled down in Scottsdale, Arizona. As for his relationship with Vivian after the repercussions emerged, I'm unsure. That story wasn't meant for me to unravel. However, there was something that astonished me throughout this ordeal. It wasn't the deception. It left its mark, just like any genuine and agonizing truth does. But by the time the reality became evident, I had already processed the shape of it enough that the shock had dissipated. What caught me off guard was the tranquility. The day following my divorce's completion, a June Friday with a gloomy forecast, I ventured to a coffee shop in West Loop, seated myself at a corner table, and focused on 3 hours of business appraisal without once dwelling on Vivian or Donovan Ashby or any related matters. As the second hour progressed, I recognized that the persistent tension residing in my chest for nearly 2 years had vanished. Not abruptly, it was more like the sensation of a burden I'd become accustomed to carrying, but hadn't realized its weight until it was no longer there. After ordering another coffee, I continued working. 16 months after the gala at Langham, I relocated to an 8th-floor apartment in Chicago's River North District, boasting a city view and minimalistic design that highlighted the roominess once filled with someone else's decisions. For 4 months, I left the Hinsdale house listed for sale until it was finally purchased. The deal was handled with the same impersonal approach I would apply to any business transaction. It was a smooth, uncomplicated transaction involving reliable buyers, favorable terms, and a satisfactory sale. Post-deal, I renewed my professional connections with renewed vigor, born out of having resolved all outstanding issues. My firm increased its St. Louis operations. I recruited 2 individuals I had long planned to hire, but kept postponing due to reasons that, in hindsight, were more domestic than business-related. I resumed regular nightly sleep. I will admit that I didn't escape this ordeal unscathed. That would be misleading and, quite frankly, odd. 11 years is 11 years. Such a long period leaves its mark. You don't simply move on without adjusting your perspective on people, how you interpret them, and what you decide to trust. However, I will tell you this. Now I pay attention more keenly, not in a cautious, secretive manner, but in the way one improves at something after experiencing it. I observe more, express my true sentiments more openly. I no longer ignore minor hints that might form an unspoken pattern. That night outside the Langham, standing by the check-in desk, hearing those words, watching the woman in the blazer run her finger down the list twice, searching for a name intentionally omitted. That instance imparted a lesson I've retained ever since. One's absence from a list clearly signifies one's position, and how you respond to this knowledge shapes all subsequent events. I smiled, replied, comprehended, and left. The decision was apt, not due to its coldness or my 3-step foresight, though I did have that advantage, but because in that instant I comprehended the real state of affairs. A man aware of the true situation has no need for a staged surprise. He simply acts. A few months ago, I found myself at a networking dinner in the West Loop, an event where one shakes 50 hands and recalls 6 conversations. Toward the end of the gathering, I stood at the bar with a drink as a woman approached me next to it and requested a glass of wine. We conversed for around 40 minutes. Her name was Adrienne. She led a commercial architecture firm in the Gold Coast. She held strong views on the changes taking place along the 606 Trail and posed insightful questions regarding market trends. At one point, she mentioned, "You appear to be someone with prior experiences." I met her gaze. "Why do you think so?" she inquired. "You observe," she explained, not with apprehension, more like someone who has practiced. I pondered on that briefly. "Something akin to that," I responded. After our dinner concluded, she offered me her business card. A week later, I reached out to her. Some stories conclude neatly, while others stretch on too long, but they all end, and then you learn what you're truly composed of.